let's cut right to the chase. I'm very curious to what your opinions and how would you summarize maybe a couple comments on just testing overall so far, and then also what your stands out to you on day 2 of winter testing.
Yeah, I think like with everything with F1 testing, right, guys? I mean, we don't know what kind of fuel loads everyone is running and what different types of setups everyone is on. But I think one of the, important things to take a look at is actually the tire compound some of these teams are running. I mean, taking a look at the screen here, Valtteri Bottas was quickest using the C5, but it's kind of like, well, so was Pierre Gasly, and I don't really think that an AlphaTauri is going to be as fast as a Mercedes, right? So I think over the longer haul, I think the more we kind of dig into what is like the race runs, what do they look like on like a harder compound, like a C3 or even a C2, like a longer distance run? Like what are we looking at with those times? And it'd be cool if we could kind of get like a breakdown of that, like if they could do that with the broadcast, but they don't. That would give us quite a bit of information. But I mean, to see Mercedes kind of bounce back after what looked like a really tough Friday is extremely important, because that car looks like a handful. It doesn't look like one of the smoother, more rides that they've produced in years past.
It's a big talking point on social media in terms of Mercedes struggles and is their run over, is their dominance over? But obviously, like you said, it's very early in testing. But how much does that affect, do you think it's going to have for them on the season, with Valtteri getting limited time and with potential gearbox issues that affected Aston Martin earlier this morning, which I believe they said isn't related to what Mercedes issues had? But do you have legitimate concerns about Mercedes' power unit reliability and just overall what you mentioned with just how much of a handful that car looks, especially earlier in this morning in the hands of Hamilton?
I mean, I'll start with the handling aspect of it first and sort of work backwards. So if we look at the way F1 cars came into this season, we've got, and I'm sure you've mentioned it on your broadcast a number of times, a reduced amount of downforce underneath the race car. So the floors of the race cars have become a lot smaller, and these teams are trying to gain back a lot of the aero advantage that they had last season by using the floor of the race car. So if you're making that floor smaller, it's going to be very time consuming, and it's going to be a lot of money to try and gain that advantage back and to pick the right direction to go in with your floor. If we take a look at Mercedes' floor, it's very complex. They have so many different types of I guess they call them flicks or flickers, they call them, on top of the actual floorboard itself, just in front of the tires to kind of redirect airflow and things of that nature. So if we just look at that as an example, and then we start moving things a little bit forward with, say tires, and I know everybody rolls their eyes when we talk about tires, but unfortunately we're going to have to talk about tires this season because the tires don't look very good at all. They look a lot slower. They look a lot more complex, and that's going to offer another round of issues. The floor that, say, the Mercedes has of Valtteri Bottas, I don't think that's going to be the floor that they're even going to start the Grand Prix on in a few weeks' time. There's no way. It's just taking a look at the race car itself on the track now. It looks like a handful. It just doesn't look smooth. It doesn't look like the Mercedes of last year or the years prior, where it seems effortless for them almost to generate a lap time, where you see the car on the track now and it's kind of like it's very skittish. It almost looks like Red Bull last year, almost, in a way, right? So that being that, I mean, I'm sure Mercedes will be able to get those little tiny things ironed out. But as for the engine, I mean, if we go back to last season, they had a lot of reliability issues during testing in Barcelona before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the pandemic, hitting, I don't know where honestly they would be in terms of reliability, because it just wasn't there. Like, it just wasn't there at all. And now we're starting to see, well, they've introduced a new gearbox. So you're starting to see that the teams who buy these gearboxes from Mercedes, they're having issues of their own. Now, whether or not they're the exact same, well, that's a question for another time, because they haven't released that information. But can we assume that it is similar? Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, all of these teams who buy Mercedes gearboxes are all having Mercedes gearbox issues, and clearly there's something going on there, right? So we can get that sorted out. We'll have a little bit more information, but also if we take a look at, the engine for this season, they're presumably they've upped the horsepower a bit on this engine. How does that reflect? How does that affect reliability? Because once you start playing with those numbers, the chances of you running into problems with engines, increases, because you're trying to increase that performance. You're putting more stress, more strain on the components, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. So the packaging on the car itself, if we also look at the other teams who run Mercedes powered power units, like the packaging alone, and by packaging I mean how the actual top fits on top of the back of the race car that we saw, blew off Sergio Perez's Red Bull earlier today. Yeah. We take a look at that. I mean, it's packaged extremely tight. Like, there's not a lot of room in there, and that will lend itself to overheating and more issues with trying to really package these things, making them tighter and smaller. So, I mean, that's what testing's all about. And we can look into, and that's what makes it fun for us to actually kind of sit here and delve into and look into all this information. But yeah, I think reliability is going to be a huge talking point, I feel, over the next few weeks.
Yeah, excellent, and that's why we really wanted to talk to you, because you can give us that perspective of a former driver and just talk about certain things that maybe us as fans we wouldn't pick up on, and that was an excellent summary. So moving a little bit onto that, to some of the other teams, maybe some that had some more successful first 2 days of testing, in particular McLaren and Alpine. Alpine getting in a ton of laps today, with Fernando Alonso at the helm of the car. And also Lando Norris, again, was running in first position for most of the PM session. Daniel Ricciardo once again finishing the AM session in first place. So what are your thoughts on some of those midfield teams of Alpine and McLaren kind of getting off to winter testing on the right foot?
I always say, usually you can tell by drivers' body language if they're happy or not. I mean, drivers normally wear their hearts on their sleeves, unfortunately. So as a racing driver, it's you can't really hide anything, right? So, I mean, taking a look at Esteban Ocon from Friday, extremely happy, right? Like, that dude he was smiles for days. So that has to tell you something right there, that absolutely over the moon, I think, with how the car is actually handling. They haven't really run into any sort of reliability issues. They've done a number of different laps. That team, they look real strong. Like, I was surprised, actually, because the old Renault car back last year, the year before, you always had a lot of issues with it, and they never really got some really good testing data. The drivers never really looked extremely happy. They were kind of like in this limbo of, hey, is this car really good? Is it not? I can't really extract the performance out of it.
Yeah. But
it's not really biting me in the butt when I do things with it. So now you look at the drivers, they seem very happy. What they're saying is the right things. So the team looks really strong, considering they're running this huge air intake on the top of the car, which is extremely weird, because you're seeing all these other teams, like I was saying, running these really tight packaged engines, and their packaging is just not it's not concealed. It's not like cling wrap to the car, right? So that was interesting for me to see that. But Digging into that a little deeper, I think that kind of has a lot to do with how the floor of the car works. Because again, like I had mentioned, teams are stripping away down. They have to strip away downforce, and the floor is one of those parts. And it seems like the air intake has something to do with funneling a little more air down there to get a little bit more downforce, which is quite interesting because I never really thought anyone would actually try something like that. McLaren, Zach Brown, I mean, that guy has really turned things around since the Honda days.
Yeah.
He really has. They have done such a great job from where they were a few years ago to where they are now. And now they look really strong. I would say after today, seeing what Lance did and having a look at some of the data from yesterday, I mean, McLaren, for me, they feel like the top of the midfield. They look extremely strong with that Mercedes engine. I think they're going to be the team to beat for the midfield for sure.
Very interesting, and yeah, they absolutely look very good. And considering some of the issues that they've had in seasons past of preseason testing, the fact that it's gone essentially completely smooth without any major issues or anything like that is an excellent positive. Now, there's a couple of questions in the chat that I wanted to ask you and get your opinion on. But first, I just wanted to do a little Canadian update. Of course, Lance Stroll in the newly branded Aston Martin. We're talking about the midfield, and of course, Aston Martin, a ton of hype behind them with what Lawrence Stroll has been able to brilliantly do with that rebrand. But I think that hype has fallen just a little bit short so far in preseason testing. Day one was a bit quiet for Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, and then obviously they had the gearbox issues this morning, and then Stroll had a decent session in the PM as well, finishing third with a 1:30.4, putting 71 laps on the board. But what do you think of Stroll so far at Aston Martin, and then also Nicholas Latifi at Williams, who finished seventh today with a 1:31.6 and also 132 laps on the board? What do you think of the Canadian boys on the grid so far?
Yeah, let's start with Williams first, for sure, and Nicky, because I didn't really expect that team to look as strong as they've looked in preseason testing. I mean, they look like, talking to Nicholas just the other day there, I mean, he was kind of underplaying like how I was like, so what are you doing today? We were just shooting the breeze kind of thing. And he was like, yeah, just in the simulator and whatever. And it didn't really sound like this, the team had, I guess, gained back too much of an advantage. But man, looking at that today, he was fastest in sector 2, which are like most of the corners are sector 2, and he held the fastest sector 2 time for most of testing, or most of today's testing, and that looks good. They look really solid. That car looks incredible. Like, it looks so much smoother than, say, like last year's car or even the year before that. It looks like they've definitely made some big gains. I think those gains are coming from maybe, I don't want to say aero, because it just doesn't, where they're fast, it kind of seems like they're faster in the slow to medium slow corners. So that kind of tends me to think that they've done a lot of work with dampers, suspension, springs, anti-roll bar. I think they've done a lot of work under there. I know they've spent some tokens, and I don't think we know yet where those are. And
yeah,
I think I can put my finger on where they are, kind of. So Williams looks good, and I'm excited to see how they do this season. And usually, like a driver like Nicholas, who I've been following, since 2013. He's always fastest in his second season of anything he's ever done. He always learns his first season.
Yeah.
And then his second season, he's always right there with everyone else. I think after last season, he was thrown in at the deep end for sure. Not a lot of time in the race car, and that's a problem. especially when you're a rookie, because in Formula One, you have so much to learn. Like, I don't think a lot of people really understand just how much information a racing driver in Formula One has to take in. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And usually you don't really see a lot of success from racing drivers who have that much to learn. You don't see true success until kind of like your third season. I think for Nicholas, I think he's going to have a great season, in all honesty. He looked sharp today. He looked really, really good. And for that team to get that much mileage under their belt, which, they're not really used to, right? Like, I mean, we go back to last season, right, guys? I mean, like, they didn't get a lot of mileage. They didn't get a lot of mileage the year before that. I mean, I think the year before that, they didn't even have a race car until the second week of testing.
That's right.
So this team has come a long way. I'm really excited for them to see where this goes. And I'm really excited for Nicholas and George too, because, George this is a big year for George. This is a big year for George. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there. As for Aston Martin, I mean, I was on the car launch a few weeks ago, and I'd gotten access to like everything that they had done. I got access to all of the different things that were inside their vault, so to speak. And they put a lot of money into it, man. Like, they invested heavily into that car launch, and it looked awesome. And the car looks awesome. And I always say that, the car may look awesome, but it may not be fast. So having a look at today, Lance did his quickest time on the C5. He looked really good when he was running the yellow stripe compound earlier. He had an issue with a lapped car. Well, he had an issue with, there was Alonso pulled off the track, and then I can't remember who was in front of him, but there was another car that was in front of him that held him up and really ruined his lap. But just before that, having a look at entering sector 2, like, car looked good. Looked really good.
Yeah.
From there, though, he pulled into the pits and didn't complete the full lap. So that leads me to believe that he was probably on a lighter fuel load, maybe. And he just didn't get to complete that part of his testing program. But then jumps out on that C5. And yeah, I believe he was like third fastest at the end of the day or something like that.
Yep.
But again, behind the AlphaTauri, and Gasly was on the exact same tire. So then we take a look at like fuel loads and things of that nature, and we just have no clue. And then also the engines as well. I mean, the engine's detuned, and they're not running full lean right now. So it's tough to say where Aston Martin is. Are they as quick as McLaren? I don't know. That's where I'm at with that one, because I still think the pecking order is going to be Mercedes, Red Bull, and then I think it's going to be like McLaren, Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, Alpine.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fierce battle, man. But I mean, it's not a horrible start for them. They've gotten some really good mileage out of the car. That's positive. They've shown some good speed, which is positive. And now it's just in terms of like development. Are they going to bring more to this car once the season starts? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are. So yeah, we'll see where it takes them, but it's a good starting point. Let's just put it there.
Yeah, excellent points brought up there. I'm not sure how you are for time. I got maybe just one or two more points I wanted to go through.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I got about 10 minutes
whenever
sure.
You need to go. I know you're busy.
Sure, thanks. Yeah.
So just last two things for me. I wanted to quickly touch on Ferrari, because obviously Ferrari were really trying to build off of a horrendous season last year, made a lot of improvements to the car at the rear. Obviously they got the new Ferrari power unit. I'm not sure what you think, but for me, they just kind of fell a little bit flat so far in the first 2 days. Just looking at Leclerc's laps earlier on today, he seemed like he was really struggling again with the rear of the car, especially out of turn 15. I saw him really running wide there a lot, and the car was also sparking a lot out of the exit of 15, which I really didn't see from too many other cars. He eventually finished 6th on the day with 73 laps and the best time of a 1:30.8. but that's behind customer-teamed Alfa Romeo Antonio Giovinazzi with the 130.7, 125 laps on the board for him. So just quickly on Ferrari, do you think that they're just kind of trying to, check all the systems, make sure that they're getting correlation with the data, or do you think that their upgrades and the changes to the car just really haven't seemed to work out just yet?
I don't think that things have worked out the way Ferrari wants them to have. Yeah. I think Carlos Sainz doesn't look comfortable, even though, yes, I understand it's only it was a second day in the car today. And that's not a lot of time. And to get comfortable in a Formula One car, usually it takes a lot longer than a day. It takes many days. So,
yeah.
But still, a guy with that much experience in Formula One, I didn't expect him to look as nervous as I think they did look. So, yeah, I don't think things have really worked out well for Ferrari just yet. That's not saying they're not in the ballpark, though, right? I mean, again, with the fuel loads, we don't know, and there's probably more upgrades coming to the car for sure. But as a starting point, I think they definitely look better than they did last year, just from the visual test. I think they do look better. I mean, the car paint, in my opinion, doesn't look any better. But oh man, that green has got to go.
That green?
What's going on there? But oh gosh. As for the engine and things like that, I mean, if we look at the customer teams, they look quite strong in the faster sections. So it looks like the engine has made a bit of an improvement. But again, we're not really seeing the real engine because that'll probably be unleashed once we get to the Bahrain Grand Prix. But yeah, Ferrari, I don't know. It just doesn't, I don't know. How does it feel for you guys? Because it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, no, I meant the same comments, and as we're doing the stream, we're in between looking on Twitter and trying to get some updates. But I was just paying attention to when Leclerc was trying to do some of his more performance runs on the softer compounds of tire, and every time they would show him coming out of 15, it would just be a ton of oversteer as soon as he put the power down, car sparking away, just similar to kind of like Hamilton and the Mercedes in the morning, where it just doesn't seem happy with the rear of the car. And, just quickly, looking at the sector times, going back to what you were talking about earlier with Latifi. So Leclerc on his best lap in Sector 2 was a 49.5 versus Latifi's best lap on a Sector 2, which was a 48.0. So, you even see Williams there making some gains on Ferrari in the middle sector there. So, yeah, it just doesn't seem like they're very happy with the car versus, the likes of Alpine or McLaren, for example.
Yeah, and I think it all just going to come down to, working this car out, trying to find its sweet spots. It was kind of reminds me a little bit of last year's Red Bull, where it was a race car that looked extremely difficult to drive, but once you kind of got it tuned into that sweet spot, you were able to extract the lap time like Verstappen and Albon could do. And similar with this Ferrari, I got a feeling it's going to be something similar where it's once they kind of nail those setups, they'll be quick. Now, are they going to be like Red Bull, Mercedes quick? I highly doubt it. I don't think they're going to get close to either of those teams. But, can they be high up in the midfield? Can they battle for third? Can they battle for fourth? Yeah, absolutely, for sure. For sure. I think anything on top of that is just gravy. I mean, only because of where they're coming from. Last season was such a disaster, and looking at this season, I mean, if they will improve for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Kind of how much gains can they make, or did they make in the off season?
Yeah, it should be interesting to find out for sure. The final one for me would be just last two things quickly. Just maybe quickly touch on the rookies on the Formula One grid. Mick Schumacher was in the car during this PM session. Also, Yuki Tsunoda and then Nikita Mazepin as well. And then just finally to wrap everything up, what are some things that fans should be looking out for on the final day of testing? And what do you kind of have your eye out on for as we wrap up testing tomorrow on Sunday?
Yeah, for the rookies, Yuki Tsunoda looks awesome. that guy looks really good. Very impressed with him. I always heard that he was really, really quick. But being quick in Formula 2 and then translating that into F1 are two totally different things. And a big part of that, again, tires, and then also how fast the race cars are, how late they can brake, how much downforce they have, and how much confidence you need to build up to really extract the lap time. As for Tsunoda, he looks so smooth. Like I was very impressed by watching him, and I'm really excited to see him race this season, because I think he's going to be one of the more impressive rookies we've seen in F1 in a while, for sure. I think Mick Schumacher and Nikita, I mean, yeah, they're in a tough spot, in all honesty. Haas came out and even said publicly that they're really not going to upgrade this car much as this season kind of rolls along, and they're going to take that investment and they're going to put it towards their 2022 car, which is smart for sure, especially for a team like Haas, right? That's a smart move. But for a driver like Mick, that's a tough situation to be put in when you're a rookie, because the car itself, coming off of last season, was already difficult to drive, and it took two drivers like Grosjean and Magnussen to really extract the performance out of it, who are two very skilled and experienced racing drivers. So I think both of those drivers are in a bit of a tough spot. I think if the balance of the race car is okay, I think that will lend itself to Mick having a smoother start to the season. I mean, I have a feeling that they're just going to go backwards from wherever they're going to start, because everyone else will just keep progressing and moving the cars forward in terms of development, where if they're not really going to develop, then they're just going to go backwards. It's just how it works. So for a driver like Mick, I think if the balance of the race car is comfortable, then I think he'll get through the season okay. Because he, again, is like another one of those racing drivers where, the first season is all about that learning, where and then the second season, it's kind of like that's where you start to extract more performance from yourself, and you learn how to extract more performance from the race car.
Yep. And maybe just quick final thoughts, what fans should be looking out for on the final day of testing?
I mean, always, again, with like the fuel loads and things like that. I mean, the long runs are, if you can get your hands on the live timing and scoring, and you can see the longer runs and see where everybody is at with those long runs, I think that's going to be really important, and that's going to tell us a lot. I really do, because a lot of the teams, they save their like push laps and things like that until the end of the day, where the track is at its premium, the sun has gone down, so the temperatures are really nice, and the track is in that really good window to extract pure performance from the race car. So those are the two things I would look at. I mean, most of the long runs, they kind of get done during the middle of the day, middle of the afternoon, and then once you get to the kind of late evening, that's where you start to see a little bit more performance being extracted from the race cars. But again, don't read too much into it. I mean, you're not going to know where everyone truly sits until we get to qualifying for the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the best way to put it. Crazy that we're already here onto the final day of testing, but this is it with the shortened season that we have, and
just 3 days, right? Like,
that's all we get.
Man, it's weird. Like, I was hoping for, and I'm sure the drivers were hoping for more too, right? I mean, 3 days just doesn't feel like enough.
Yeah, especially with the huge change that we had in the grid too.
Big time, right? And I mean, if you're inexperienced, like a rookie or something, 3 days is, well, they're not even getting a full 3 days. I mean, they're getting like a full day, and if maybe a little tiny bit more than that. And that's just, I don't know, if you're a rookie, that's not enough. That's just not enough.
Well, if you're somebody like Williams, for example, you just get 1 day.
Yeah, I mean, again, right? Like for Nicholas, you're just getting, in George, just getting 1 day in the race car. That's just not enough. It's going to take things it's going to take those teams to really learn the cars. It's going to take like a couple weeks now, and it's going to, development's going to be a little bit slower. And then, it's just, you don't really know where your reliability actually truly kind of is. And so I think for the teams that are getting those longer runs in, I mean, that's really that's a really positive sign. So today for like, Williams, for instance, what is it? 132 or something they put in,
Yep.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really good for them. That's really, really good. So yeah, it's doesn't feel like enough, right?
Yeah, for sure. But we won't have to wait too long for the first race of the season. It's about a little bit less than 2 weeks away. So it'll be right on our doorstep. But Tim, I think that was a very good and comprehensive breakdown of the entire day's worth of testing and all the information and the data in every single team. So we really appreciate your time. I know you got to run because you got your own work to do with testing. Maybe let the viewers know where they can find your work and your social media channels as well.
Yeah, so at Tim Hauraney on both Twitter and Instagram. Last name is spelled Hauraney. It's a tough one. Trust me. It is a tough one. So, everyone can catch most of my work there. And podcast is TSN Racing Pod. You can get it anywhere you get your podcast. But I just want to say thanks very much, guys, for having me on. Really appreciate it. I love what you do with the show. I watched a lot of your live feed for YouTube, and I was like, good for them. That's a long time to talk with not a lot of information. So way to go.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wouldn't do it, but good for you for doing it. Trust me. That's impressive, man. You guys are rocking it, and keep doing your thing.
We appreciate that. Yeah, it helps to have a nice fan base as well that keeps the conversation going. And then, of course, bringing on great, knowledgeable guests like yourself just puts a nice bow on the day's event. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of testing. Enjoy the start of the season, and I'm sure we'll connect again soon during the 2021 season.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime. And thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Have a good one, Tim.
Yeah, see you guys. Thanks again.
See you, Tim. Thanks.